How do you improve the intention?
Right.
How do you improve the intention of a corporation?
I think to live out their, how do you improve their, not the intention, but the way they live it out? Because everybody's intention is noble. And I think by raising the questions you're raising. Now you use the word ensure, as if somebody at the top can ensure something, guarantee something. These are populated by human beings. And so they're going to be imperfect. So even the idea to ensure it. But I think it's the right conversation. I think asking the question, bringing people together and say, to what extent are we living out our intentions, is the way to ensure it. You can't ensure it with a fist or an incentive program or by watchdog journalism. It's not powerful, it's just interesting. It's interesting. But what makes the difference is to say we need to have this be the conversation. Are we living out our intentions at every level?
But you know, the conversation, Peter, and I'd like to bring Anil here as well, is that and many of the commentators have today said that despite the crisis, businesses are still being run on exactly the same principles as they were earlier. What can make that change? Of course, it's going to be a slow process, but are companies even beginning to look at themselves and thinking of changing the way they work?
We need a network of the good. You see, what happens is that the network of the not so good is always very strong. So we all hear stories about how politicians, business leaders, and the corrupt collude to impact society for personal gain. But when you create a network of the good, they not just do good work, they also share it. Now the problem with good people is that they are generally more humble. They don't like to go out and share the things that they are doing. But the endeavor, at least in soil, is, and therefore it starts with a consortium of these 30 companies. They may not be the most perfect companies, but you know, they are good companies. And they have decided to support this whole vision to say it is possible to have inspired leadership. You can be ethical even in today's times.
But will the change come from classrooms or will the change come from boardrooms?
Actually, it's a combination, because what happens is when our students go out and start talking this new language, there are a lot of people in corporates also talking that language. This gets reinforced. In the boardroom, when the new conversation begins to say, can we look ourselves in the mirror, like my good friend Nitin Noria did at Harvard. He called the faculty meeting and said, are we responsible in any way for this crisis? And I think that was a very good question for a faculty member to ask.
So let me put this question.
I don't think it's going to come from the boardroom. I don't think fundamental change comes from the top or the center. It comes from the fringe and the middle. And I think as the middle and people on the edge find their voice, get organized, come together, create a network of the good. The boardroom, to me, are followers. They're not creators. And that the higher you go, with some exceptions, all right, the less learning there is, the less curiosity there is. These people, in some ways, are a prisoner of our expectations. And so I wouldn't look to I want to stop talking about the boardroom as if they're cause. I think they're effect. And I think people in the academic world, some organizations willing to be on the margin or willing to live with the cost of a longer term, people in the middle, are going to come together over time.
Would you agree, Mr. Muthuraman, that change will come from the fringe and the middle and not from the leadership at the top?
Change comes from variety of things, and it comes from variety of play. We also must remember that the boardroom is also occupied by people who have been through the classroom. And it's a matter of refining, and it is chipping away slowly. It's not going to happen overnight. And this change will take some time. But just like, and I don't see anything happening overnight. But if this change doesn't happen, because the world, you know, once you have a crisis of the nature that we are going through and which we have had in the last couple of years, people will begin to ask questions to themselves. And these are good triggers for change. In fact, one of the positive things of this whole global recession is companies will start thinking better about fundamentals in terms of leadership development and what kind of people need to take what kind of decisions, how people ought to be rewarded or not to be rewarded. Some of these questions are beginning to get asked.
This one thought, and I'd like to have your reactions, all of your reactions on this, that the way in which rewards are structured or the goals are set, could this be if this is changed, could this be one fundamental change which could make leadership more ethical, which could look at leadership in a more wholesome way and not just for the corporation?
Yes, I'm a firm believer in that. Because what happens is, people generally behave on the basis of how they get measured. You tell me how you measure me, and I will tell you how I will behave. That's normally the theory. If companies get measured on the basis of total returns to the society, which includes stakeholders, shareholders, customers, employees, and the society, then you will find organizations behaving differently. But if you measure companies on the basis of profits and market capitalization and so on, they will only chase that. So the means of measurement is important. And that is also beginning to happen, but slowly.
Peter, how can this change happen?
I just want to make one statement, and then I think incentives are overrated. With all due respect, I think people behave much more complex than what the reward system. And so this focus on the reward system, to me, is part of the problem. And so I think the change will happen by us deciding to have a conversation about what kind of world we want to create together. And if we keep focusing on rewards as if people are, pigeons punching the red dot to get a pellet, nothing's going to change. This is not a problem of reward systems, even though they're out of line. It's a problem of us deciding who we want to become. And I don't think it'll happen from the top or by regulation. I think it'll happen by this conversation.
Anil?
The traditional performance management system does more damage in a company than any good. All our research shows that at the end of a performance management cycle, it actually destroys morale, even in good run companies. What is the alternative? You need to create that pride in the work people do. You need to create that sense of challenge, almost a sense of adventure in learning together. When people get challenged, when they develop pride, and their spirit gets ignited, they completely exceed all expectations. And when they collectively do so, organizations become really special. That's what my learning is.
Thank you, the three of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.